Hi there, thank you for coming along to Merthyr Science Festival. My name's Sarah, and today I'm going to be talking to you about environmental pollution. I'm not sure how many people we have joining us live because it is a beautiful day outside today, and I would not blame you if you are out making the most of it. For anyone who is joining us live, you can post comments and I will be able to see them. So if you have any questions or any comments that you'd like to make at any time during this talk, feel free to do that and I'll try and get to your comments as soon as I possibly can. So let's crack on. Today the key things that I'm going to be talking about are going to be what is pollution? Why does pollution matter? And what can we do to help? And if you are joining live, something you can do at the start of this talk is maybe write down your answers to these questions. So what you think pollution is, why you think pollution matters, and what you think we can do to help. And by the end of the talk, your opinions might have stayed exactly the same, or they might have changed. But you can let me know in the comments what you think pollution is, what that means to you, why you think it matters, and the things you think we can do to help. Let me know those and let me know if your ideas change at the end of this talk. Brilliant. Okay. So as I already said, you can ask any questions that you have or make any comments at any time. Of course, you don't need to raise your hand or post them in the chat. You can just post those as a comment. And I love to get questions. So please do let me know if you have any. Okay. So when we're talking about pollution, there are lots of different types of pollution. So I'm going to do my best to kind of describe some of the different types of pollution and the ways that they affect humans and the ways that they might affect animals too. So our first type of pollution. So noise pollution is kind of self-explanatory. Very loud noises, and if we're meant to be noises on this slide, but they haven't worked for whatever reason. They worked before, they didn't work now. So noise pollution it can be traffic sounds, it could be the sounds of big crowds, it could be any kind of loud noises. And for people living in cities, they might be surrounded by this type of pollution all of the time, and we may not kind of think about this as pollution, but it can have effects on us and it can have effects on wildlife. So hang on, let's see if we can go back to the city and get the traffic noises. No, we can't. Okay, so but those bird songs, they're not just loud, there's lots and lots of people communicating to each other as well. So it's an important form of communication for animals. Okay, so why does noise pollution matter for us? So if you have a lot of loud noises around you all of the time, it can mean that you have hearing loss, unfortunately. It can make you really annoyed and stressed out. So if you think about being in a really busy environment where there's lots going on and maybe you're finding it really difficult to hear someone who's standing right next to you, that can be really annoying and stressful. It means that maybe sometimes you can't get to sleep, especially if you've got traffic or sirens or loud noises outside your window at night. It can be really difficult to sleep. And all that stress can sometimes lead to your heart working harder. So your heart's working harder to push blood around your body. And over time, that can mean that your heart becomes diseased and maybe doesn't work as effectively. So what about for animals? Why does it matter? So some animals change their behavior. so birds that live in busy cities, because it's so loud, they can't hear each other communicate. So that bird song that we were talking about before, that's birds talking to each other. And when there's a lot of noise pollution, they can't actually hear each other. So some birds have actually started singing in the middle of the night so that they can actually hear each other sing. So robins in city centres, even in Cardiff, they have started singing in the middle of the night so they can hear each other. Animals get stressed too. So we talk about humans getting stressed and the illnesses that can happen because we get stressed. But animals can suffer stress too. And you might know that your cat or your dog can become stressed if they listen to loud fireworks or something like that. But wild animals can experience that stress too when they hear loud noises. Humans can experience hearing loss, but animals can too. So especially insects, their hearing can be damaged over time through loud noises. And we kind of talked about bird communication, but also communication for lots and lots of other animals. So animals can communicate in lots of different ways. They might communicate through smell, they might communicate through body language, but they may also communicate through sound. So that's a really important type of communication too. And fish and whales, their communication can be affected by things like boats going over the surface of the water, offshore wind farms, so like wind turbines that are in the middle of the sea. Those can be really noisy and they can stop whales and fish communicating. So you might kind of already know that whales make kind of long, low sounds to communicate with each other. And you might have heard it called whale song. So we know that whales can communicate, but fish talk to each other too over a lot shorter distances, not like whales. And it's important for fish to be able to talk to each other, to be able to tell each other if there is a predator coming, another fish that wants to eat them, to if it's a male and a female fish, they might be asking each other if they want to be boyfriend or girlfriend. So they need to be able to hear each other. So there's lots of reasons. And this is a really great video, which is on that I got from YouTube. It's BBC, and it's all about the different noises that fish make, and you can actually hear the fish making all these different sounds to talk to each other. And it's amazing the amount of different sounds that fish actually make. We don't really think of fish talking to each other, but they're chatting away all the time. Okay, where are we? Right, so that was noise pollution. We got a few more types of pollution to talk about. This next one is light pollution. So light pollution is another form of pollution that maybe we don't think about very often. But what all it is when we have light that we might use for something. So a street light, for example, we need that to be able to see at night and to keep ourselves safe. Or headlights on cars, we need to be able to use those to see the road, to keep ourselves safe. Or the lights in our houses, we won't be able to do things at night if we didn't have lights in our houses. But the light that isn't being used and is kind of just spilling out into the environment, that is light pollution. So we can kind of see in this photo that the sky is kind of this orangey kind of grey colour. And that is the light pollution being reflected back off the clouds and back off the sky, and that's causing that orange glow. And the biggest kind of thing that we notice about when we don't have light pollution is that we can see the stars. And that's really nice for us. We like to be able to see the stars because they're very beautiful. But for lots of animals, the stars in the night sky or the moon are going to be really important for them being able to work out where they need to go. So for us, why does light pollution matter? It can make you, if you are in constant light all the time, if it's never really dark, it can actually result in you feeling sad. It can stop you getting a good night's sleep if there's lots of light all of the time and it's never getting dark. And again, that can stress out our bodies. It can lead to our hearts working harder, which can result in heart disease. But what about for animals? So we already talked about how the stars and the moon might be important for some animals to work out where they need to go. So baby turtles, when they hatch out of their eggs on the beach, they don't have their mum or dad around. Their mum lays the eggs and they leave. So the babies have to make their way to the sea all by themselves. So what the babies do is they look for the reflection off the water from the moon, and that will tell them which way to go. So they head towards the light. But a big problem for baby turtles is that when we have really bright cities, the turtles might think so they go towards the cities instead of towards the sea. And when that happens, they usually don't survive because they need to be in the water to survive. And there are lots of animals that like to eat them. So the more time that they spend on land and not in the sea, the more at risk they are. Animals can get stressed and ill too, especially nocturnal animals, animals that come out just at night. It's very difficult for those animals to work out when it's day and when it's night if it's light all of the time. So that's really important for the health of these nocturnal animals. Communication, we already talked about how some animals communicate through smell and body language and through sound. Other animals actually communicate through light, and we'll talk about this in just a second. We also see changes in behavior. So moths and other insects that fly at night, they also use light to work out where they need to go, and they usually use the light of the moon to be able to find their way at night. And when there are bright street lights, we often see insects, especially moths, kind of fluttering around under that street light. And that's not a natural behavior. That's something that they do because they think they're heading towards the moon, but they're actually heading towards a bright light. Frogs as well. So to be able to communicate with each other, frogs make loud noises. And the louder the noise they make, the kind of better and tougher the frog that they are if they're a male. And the female frogs will like the males who can make the loudest noises the best. So if there's a lot of light pollution, the frogs actually stay much quieter. And it's probably because in the daytime, they're at risk of being eaten. So they can't make a loud noise because the predator might eat them. But in the nighttime, they're safer to make their noises. So when there's artificial light at night and this light pollution, they think it's day, so they keep quiet. But that means that they can't communicate, and it means that they can't, the boy frogs can't show off to the girl frogs and show that they're the best, fittest frogs. Okay, so an example of an animal that communicates through light are these fireflies. And there's another amazing video on YouTube by National Geographic, which shows you these synchronous fireflies that all glow at the same time, and it's amazing to see. But some of the reasons that this is so important for fireflies is when there's light pollution, it makes it hard for other fireflies to see their lights. And it's not just important for other fireflies to see their lights, it's important to work out how quickly those lights are flashing. So different types of firefly will have lights that flash at different speeds and patterns. And being able to tell apart one pattern from another can mean the difference between life and death for a firefly. So there are some fireflies that are predatory and eat other fireflies. So they use the pattern of their light to trick fireflies to come near them, and then they eat them. So if you're a firefly, you need to tell these patterns apart, otherwise you might get tricked by a predatory firefly who might eat you. It's also really important for fireflies who are looking for boyfriends or girlfriends to be able to tell which fireflies are the same type of firefly as they are, to be able to find each other in the night. Oh, okay. So there is an interactive quiz on all of the things that we've talked about on pollution so far, and some of the things that we'll talk about. Because of the fact that we're doing this for YouTube, we're not able to do the quiz live, but you will be able to access the quiz during the session and afterwards through Kahoot. So you can, I will post a link to the Kahoot quiz in the description box below the video, and you'll be able to do the quiz there. So I'm just going to take this opportunity to quickly check the comments just to see if anyone has asked any questions. Give me a chance to. Okay, right. No, I don't think there's any comments just yet. Oh, wait. Okay, great. So unfortunately, I froze at some point, and I'm sorry, I didn't realize that I'd frozen. But I don't think we've had any questions just yet. So if you are watching live, don't forget to ask me questions at any point, and I will try and answer those as best I can. Okay, so we've talked about two different types of pollution so far. We've talked about noise pollution and light pollution, and now we're going to talk about refuse or rubbish. So we kind of know that we need to recycle things where we can, and we need to pick up after ourselves when we litter. But there's lots of different issues that this kind of pollution can cause for humans and animals. And there's kind of some different types of pollution as well that we'll talk about. So we've done quite a lot of studies to look at the effects of plastic pollution, particularly on wildlife. And we found lots of things like polar bears have quite a lot of plastics in their stomach. So a friend of mine studies polar bears and found that polar bears who are living quite near to human settlements have lots of plastic in their stomachs. This bird is called a storm petrel. It's a seabird that flies at night. And storm petrels quite often get bits of plastic fishing net around their ankles, which sometimes lead to them losing toes or even feet. And lots of other, especially animals that live in the sea, are really affected by this type of plastic pollution. So all this rubbish, we don't think about rubbish ending up in the sea. But this can happen because it may blow into the sea from land, or it may happen because people are leaving rubbish on places like the beach or around the coast. But a lot of our refuse, especially plastic rubbish, ends up in the sea. And it takes a very, very long time for plastic rubbish to break down. So when plastic enters our ecosystems, it may be there for millions of years. So it takes a very long time for it to completely disappear. And when we talk about plastic pollution and refuse, the ways that it's kind of affecting us as humans is we kind of have to experience that in our environments, and that's not a nice thing for us. But also we're a part of the food chain as well. So other animals, especially those that live in the sea, might be coming into contact with pollution, plastic pollution, and having that in our bodies. And then that can mean that humans can end up with that pollution in their bodies too. And we're going to talk a little bit about that when we talk more about water pollution. So this on the top of the water here. So we've talked about how plastics can end up in the water. Other chemicals can end up in the water too. So plastics over time can break down a little bit, and the little bits that are left over are called microplastics. So these can dissolve into the water and then sort of become invisible. But other chemicals can get into the water too, and those can be things like chemicals that farmers use on their land to help plants grow, which we all need to grow our food. And those can end up running, when it rains, running off the fields into rivers, and then those rivers end up eventually in the sea. And when they get into the sea, they can cause problems like this. So this is an algal bloom. So this green stuff is plant life. And this plant life loves the chemicals that are ended up in the sea. So they eat up all those chemicals and they grow like mad. And then we get this green carpet on top of the water. And what can happen then is that plants and animals underneath that kind of green carpet can't get any sunlight. And that can be a big problem. So I have my somewhere. So I have a pristine ocean environment. And this is something that you can do at home. And I will tell you all the things that I'm using in case you want to have a go at home. I'm just going to switch my screen to my video. How do I do that? So I'm just going to turn off I'm just going to stop sharing momentarily. There we go. Okay. So this is my pretend pristine ocean environment. I'm going to put some sea creatures in it. Oh, the octopus won't fit. I do have a marine iguana. 1 second. Okay. So we have our pristine ocean environment. We have a marine iguana, which they don't live in the ocean all the time, but they can dive for long periods of time to catch their food that they need. Okay. So this is, if we imagine a sea or an ocean, and then we talked about refuse and plastic. So we have lots of bits of plastic waste that can then end up in our seas and oceans. So that's our plastic waste. And some of this plastic waste is going to take a very long time to disintegrate and is going to stay intact for a long time. And then other bits are going to dissolve. Some bits are going to kind of dissolve more quickly than others, and then release very small parts of plastic into the water around them, which are these microplastics, these very small plastics. And all of these types of plastic, the big kind of pieces of plastic that don't dissolve that quickly, and the smaller pieces of plastic are going to be consumed by animals that are living in marine environments, and also by plants that are living in marine environments. And then we talked about this algae, the green algae. So these chemicals from the plastics, but also from, remember, they're coming from farmland as well. They can also come from animal poo, from farms, and even human sewage waste. So they're being fed on by this green algae. And then we start to get a really heavy layer of this green algae on top of the water. And then what happens over time is that we get so much green algae growing, it blocks out the sunlight, and it blocks out the sunlight for the plants that are growing on the seafloor below. So this is blocking all the light, which kills the plants living on the bottom of the water. And when these plants die, it means that they're no longer able to produce oxygen that animals like the marine iguana needs to breathe, and it's stopping the other plants growing that the marine iguanas need to eat. So if you're trying this at home, the little bits and bobs that I've used for my marine environment, I've got some lentils in here at the bottom, which I use for my big parts of particulate pollution, my big plastic pollution, and some couscous. I've also got some dissolvable vitamins in here that I've used to simulate the microplastics. You could also use sprinkles, but I couldn't find my sprinkles. And then our green algae at the top. This is a mixture of some oil and some environmentally friendly poster paint. So if you want to have a go at making that at home, and if you do have a go, then try and see how difficult it is to clean up the water. Can you get the water back to its pristine condition that it was before all this pollution happened? How difficult is that? How easy is that? Have a go at that. And if you try it, you can let me know in the comments on the YouTube video. Or you could even get in touch with Minerva Science Festival and pass on your results of your experiment if you give this a go. Okay, back to our presentation. Okay, so we were talking about water pollution and that eutrophication, that algal blooms that stop the other plants growing, and it can reduce the amount of food available for animals like our marine iguana. I know there was a question as well about what we can do to stop plastic pollution getting into the oceans, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Okay, so as I said, this type of water pollution can also come from animal wastes. So when the rain falls on those farms and then washes out to sea, that can take animal waste in it, which can again cause those algal blooms that block the sunlight. And other things like pesticides. So when we grow our food, we also use chemicals that kill insects that feed on crops and feed on our food, because we want that food. We don't want the insects to eat it all. So that pesticides are another chemical that we use on land, which may then get into our oceans. Okay, so water pollution can cause sickness and death in humans and animals. So things like those algal blooms can be really serious for different animals, and even serious for humans as well. If the chemicals that get into the water then are in the food that humans eat, like fish, then that can be serious for humans too. We can also have lots of germs in things like human waste and animal waste if that's ended up in our oceans. Different heavy metals can accumulate too. Eutrophication, which is the fancy scientific word for that green algal bloom, and also bacteria and things that can live in the water. Okay. So our very last type of pollution for today is atmospheric pollution or airborne pollution. And this is usually what we kind of describe as either a gas. So when we talk about gases, these are usually invisible. So the oxygen that we breathe in is a gas, and the carbon dioxide that we breathe out is a gas too. So those are gases. Carbon dioxide can be a type of air pollution. There are lots of other gases that can too. We can also talk about particle pollution, which are teeny, teeny, tiny particles in the air that we breathe in all the time and don't notice it. And there's lots of different types of pollution when we talk about those particles. So an example of that might be pollen. So at this time of year, if you have hay fever, you're breathing in pollen all the time. And if you have hay fever, your immune system is fighting back against that pollen, because that's what makes you then sneeze and your eyes water and you feel a bit rubbish. Okay, so air pollution can come from car exhausts. It can come from factories. There are lots of different sources of air pollution outdoors. There are also a lot of sources of air pollution indoors too. We talked about pollen as well. And some of these other sources of air pollution might be from a fire burning in your home. That can sometimes cause air pollution. Mold can cause air pollution. So when we see like the blue dots on bread and things like that, if we have a lot of mold in our homes, that can then cause air pollution. Cigarette smoke is a really big source of air pollution, especially when it's inside the home, because that can hang out in the air for a really long time and cause damage to our lungs. And dust as well is another form of air pollution. So air pollution is just teeny tiny particles in the air or gases in the air, which can cause different problems. And some ways that this matters to humans is it can be triggering for people with asthma. So if you have asthma, and lots of people do, things like pollen, things like dust and mold might trigger an asthma attack, or just make your chest feel tight and make it difficult for you to breathe. So this kind of air pollution, these are all really important for people with asthma. Lung disease in general, our lungs can become damaged and not work so well over time because we're breathing in this particle pollution or this gas pollution. Heart disease as well, our hearts can become damaged over time. And climate change too. So climate change, especially global warming, is when sunlight is being beamed down to Earth from the sun all of the time. And all of these gases that we're putting into our atmosphere kind of form a big blanket around the Earth. So the sunlight gets in, and then when the heat kind of bounces back, it can't, because it's trapped inside that blanket of gases. And over time, that's causing the temperature on the Earth to heat up. And on a day like today, when we're in the middle of a heat wave, that might not seem like a bad thing. But in long term, if climate change continues, that might mean a lot of different things for our planet. It might mean less habitat for lots of plants and animals. It might mean that deserts get larger. It might mean that the sea levels rise, and some of the land disappears below water. It is a big problem for lots of polar animals living in the North and South Poles because the ice may melt. It can cause a lot of different problems for a lot of different animals and for humans too. Okay, but why else does air pollution matter for animals? And we really don't know. So we haven't done enough science just yet to work out all of the ways that air pollution may be bad for animals. We know that it's bad for humans, things like asthma and lung disease, but we don't know about these things in animals. And that's something that maybe we need to research in future, but we know it's probably not having a good effect. And that's something that maybe future scientists will study, is the effects of air pollution in wildlife. Okay, so we've covered the first two key questions: what is pollution and why does it matter? And now we're going to finally look at what we can do to help all this, most importantly. And I know one of the questions asked about that too. So there are lots of things that we can do to help all of these issues. And the best news is some of the things that we can do will help resolve a lot of different issues all at the same time. So we can combat a lot of different types of pollution by changing one behavior. So that is brilliant news. So one of the things we can do is we can reduce. So that might mean reducing the amount of litter we produce. So one kind of way I talk about this is some restaurants and places have changed to using paper straws instead of plastic. So that's great. It's great to use a paper straw instead of plastic because we know that plastic takes so long to break down. But we could just not use a straw at all. We can think about whether we need to use these things. We can buy a little plastic bag of carrot sticks. Or we could cut up a carrot at home and not use any plastic. There are really teeny tiny ways that we can reduce the amount of plastic packaging that we use and try to reduce this kind of problem of plastic pollution. We can also reuse things. So I've seen some really great ideas for using plastic bottles to make hanging planters and bird feeders, and I think that's really awesome. Or if you have a plastic bottle that you use for water, you can just keep using that same plastic bottle, and that's a really simple way to reduce the amount of plastic waste that you produce. And we can recycle too. And these things will help to reduce the amount of plastic that ends up littering our streets and the places that we use. And it'll also help to reduce the amount of plastic that ends up in our oceans and our seas too. So that's a really great thing that we can do. It also means that we produce less air pollution because companies are producing less plastics. So you're helping with with air pollution as well. And you're stopping that breakdown of microplastics in the sea and stopping those chemicals entering into the seas. So you're helping with that water pollution too. So just by reusing a plastic bottle or by making a different choice when it comes to buying a snack or making a snack at home, you can make a huge difference to the environment. Another thing you can do, turn off lights that you're not using, and that will help to reduce the amount of light pollution that we talked about. And it will also help to reduce the pollution in the atmosphere because the less electricity that we use, then the less needs to be generated, and that can help to reduce pollution too. We can choose to walk or cycle to school or work or wherever we're going instead of taking a car, which helps to reduce noise pollution. It helps to reduce air pollution too, and it keeps us fit and strong and healthy. So that's fantastic. And other things that we can do is helping with things like beach cleanups or helping to clean up a local area. And that is a wonderful thing to do. But one thing that we need to make sure we're doing is doing it safely. So we're only ever doing that with an adult if you're under under a certain age, or we're making sure that we're using litter pickers and gloves and doing these things safely. So that's really important too. And then the last thing that I'm going to say today, and the most important thing that you can do to help with all these different types of pollutions, is tell the story about pollution, about all the different ways that pollution affects us and affects the animals that we share our planet with and affects our planet too. And make sure as many people as possible know how they can change things and what they can do to help reduce pollution. So to do this, I would definitely say to do this in a way that you love. And that if you love to draw, make a poster. If you are, if you really want to make a YouTube video or be on YouTube, you could make a video. You could sing a song. You could write a play all about the ways pollution affects our planet, ourselves, and the animals we share the planet with. And don't forget to share your videos. So share them, or share your videos or drawings or posters or whatever you make or you create, and share them with friends and family. You could send them to Merthyr Science Festival to show them all the different ways that you are helping to reduce pollution. And I would really love to see them. Okay, so these are all of the different things that we've talked about today. Ooh, all the different types of pollution, all the ways that they might be affecting us and the animals that we share our planet with. So whether that is noise pollution affecting insects being able to hear each other, or fish being able to hear each other, or light pollution stopping fireflies from communicating, litter in our oceans and in the places we live, affecting wildlife, all those different things we've talked about a lot. And these are all things that you can talk about when you create your own poster or video, or however you want to carry on telling the story about pollution. And all that's left for me to say is thank you very much for listening today. I hope you've enjoyed this talk about pollution, and I hope you're enjoying Merthyr Science Festival, and that you continue to come along to all of the wonderful events. And do let me know in the comments if there is anything that I need to make clearer from this talk, or if you're not watching live, you can get in contact with Merthyr Science Festival and ask me questions too. And I'm just going to check before we finish if we've had any more questions that I can answer for you right now. Let's have a quick check. Oh, so you can get in touch with us by email at Merthyr Science Festival by emailing Merthyr Science Festival, and that's at gmail.com. And that will be in the comments as well, I think. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for coming along today. I hope you've enjoyed, and that you come along to some of the other fantastic events for Merthyr Science Festival. Thanks very much. Bye.